Our game, after being finished, got rejected from Steam right before we were about to put it out. In this video, I'm going to explain what happened. Let's get started. So, welcome back. It's been a while. For those that have not been following along, my team and I have been working on a game called Night Run, which is a procedurally generated moto runner game where you drive through a city and look at artwork and listen to music. Our original plan was to put it out on Steam in early July, and we spent a bunch of time implementing Steam achievements and testing it on Steam Deck and driving wish lists to our Steam page, only to find out that we were not going to be able to release on Steam when we submitted the app for app review and got rejected, which, as you can imagine, was not a nice feeling. The reason that we were rejected by Steam is because our game makes use of AI-generated imagery. And Steam has announced a ban against that imagery basically in early July. When we saw that, we actually saw some of that come up and we discussed it, but because of kind of the language in the announcement, we thought that this was a copyright issue, like somebody used Midjourney to make pictures of Sonic that they didn't have the rights to, or generated images of Pikachu that they weren't supposed to and put them in their game. And so I thought, oh, well, you're not violating any copyrights, so we're gonna be fine. Narrator voice. In fact, it was not fine. Instead, the ban is about the underlying training data that is used to train these diffusion-based models like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. And what is happening is that there is a legal ambiguity about whether training an image model on, in this case, it's the Lion data set, which was scraped from the web, whether that constitutes kind of fair use or not, right? And it's undecided and up in the air, and we're going to need to see some kind of legal process play out, maybe some laws or maybe just some kind of cases that decide whether or not there is a copyright issue with using these models or not. My interpretation of Valve's actions here is that they are playing it safe to wait and see where the legal shoe falls on this question before allowing or permanently banning the use of AI-generated imagery on Steam. Notably, Valve did have an exception saying if you can prove that you own all of the training data and you have the copyright to it, then that would be permissible, right? So if you trained a model from scratch, I think that would be allowed. Without making this video all about my opinions about generative AI, what I will say is that I think it's a tool and that it can be used in an ethical or unethical way. My basic position is stealing from artists is bad, whatever tools you're using. Obviously, AI makes it a different game because it can be done at such speed and such scale, but fundamentally, I think the ethical principle is the same. You should not steal, directly copy, quote, make stuff that's excessively derivative of artists, period. You should always try to do something original, whatever tools you're using. But what I don't buy is the argument that AI can only be used to make derivative copyright rip-off works, right? I think, like in the example of photography type work, there is stuff that you can do that genuinely is original and new. Now, the funny part about this is we actually expected some kind of challenge from Steam based on the fact that the game incorporates NFTs, right? Another controversial technology. In this case, Steam actually had guidelines published about what the rules were and how you were allowed to use and not use NFTs in your game, which we carefully followed. We were ready to have that conversation with the folks at Steam and say, look, we read your guidelines. This is how we implemented the NFT component of the game, AKA basically there is no crypto, blockchain, anything built into the game itself. We show the artwork, but the game is just a game. You don't need to buy anything or trade anything or do anything to be able to play the game. I felt like we were ready for that conversation. Then, of course, this AI thing comes out deep into production and a month before we're ready to release, and we weren't ready for that. And that really kind of put a stop to our goal of releasing on Steam, which obviously stings a lot and is something we're pretty sad about because we love Steam and we were really trying to follow the rules and make a good free game to put on Steam. But ultimately, I think I, as one of the leaders of the team, have to take responsibility for the fact that we incorporated two really risky, new, controversial technologies into the project, being NFTs and AI art. And that was a risk that we chose to take. And in this case, it's gone against us. And that's something basically that I have to take responsibility for and just say, well, we took a risk and it came back to bite us. And we take our lumps and keep going. I think that there's a second bigger picture point on this that I think is worth discussing. Getting rejected by Steam really, especially, luckily in our case, this was a free game we already funded the production through the NFT sale, right? So we were not desperately eating ramen noodles, waiting to put the game out and get paid. That would have been a really, really hard pill to swallow and probably would have meant the end of our studio. But it was a tough experience, and it really did make me think, we're in a world where, as game developers, we really are at the mercy of these companies in terms of access to the market. Steam in PC gaming is really the 9 million pound gorilla. You have the Epic Game Store, which is, even with all of their money from Fortnite, is still much, much smaller than Steam. On the mobile platforms, you have Apple with their, very strong monopoly over the App Store, and on consoles, those are all operated by the console providers. This is something we want to be careful about as game developers, is living in a world where any way for us to connect with players and get to the market is so strongly controlled by these companies, which can just kick us off. I do know that in this case, both NFTs and AI imagery are kind of unpopular topics, and indie game fans or indie game developers will be like, that's good that Steam is banning it. Forget those guys, kick them off of there, right? I would just hope that folks have enough imagination to imagine that in this case it's happening with some technologies that you basically don't like, but that it could very well happen with something that you did like, or a type of content or subject matter that you liked getting blacklisted. And so I think it is something worth thinking about, the degree to which we have kind of allowed our industry to be taken over by these platforms and how much power we've given them. And maybe that's something that we want to look at in a critical way. This brings us to, what are we going to do? What's next? And, I mentioned Epic Game Store. We're going to be releasing exclusively on Epic. And this is for a number of reasons. One, because they're kind of one of the few other viable large game storefronts that we can be on. Also, importantly, and this is kind of ironic for me being someone who worked at Unity for years, and there was always this rivalry with Epic and Unreal. But Tim Sweeney, the kind of positions he's been taking with his battle with Apple over the App Store cut that they were taking from Fortnite, with his willingness, or with the company's willingness, to allow NFT or blockchain-based games on the Epic Game Store, and now with this decision of theirs not to follow Steam in a kind of an immediate AI imagery ban, I do really respect the pluralistic or live and let live type attitude they're taking of, maybe we don't ourselves want to use these technologies or agree with them, but we are going to allow people who do want to use them to make games with them, to distribute to people who do want to engage with them and play with them. I think that that is increasingly important as the tech landscape gets more and more polarized. I really do appreciate Sweeney and Epic's position of allowing a range of technologies and types of games and different types of things a place to reach players via their platform. And I think it's actually ended up being more kind of aligned with our values, which is surprising to me, but interesting, and I think is something worth thinking about if you're a game developer as well. So last but very, very much not least, please wishlist Nightrun on the Epic Game Store. I'll put a link to the store page in the video description. Thank you so much to those of you who have supported us all the way on this journey, either financially or just by watching these videos and commenting and so on. It really means a lot to us. And really, really, really what I want and hope for is just for people to play the game and experience it and hopefully enjoy it. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it's something I'm truly proud of how it came out. The art, the music, the gameplay, I think it's something that we really stand behind, and so I would really love people to experience it via the Epic Game Store. So please do check that out. Thanks so much for watching, and thanks for joining us on this journey so far. It's not over, so thanks again.